Leave my wife alone." The command cut through the ballroom so sharply that conversation stopped mid-sentence. Crystal chandeliers glittered above hundreds of guests dressed in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. A string quartet continued playing softly near the stage, but even the music seemed distant for a moment. Every eye turned toward the center of the room where Warren Ashford stood protectively beside his wife. At 62, Warren was one of the most respected billionaires in America. Though he had lost his eyesight years earlier, his presence still commanded attention wherever he went. Tonight was no exception. His annual charity gala had filled the grand ballroom of the Ashford Foundation with philanthropists, politicians, celebrities, and business leaders from across the country. Standing several feet away from him was Simone Hartwell. The black woman froze briefly as dozens of strangers stared at her. She had reached out only seconds earlier, gently touching Warren's arm while trying to get his attention. She never raised her voice. She never caused a scene. Yet the reaction around her made it seem as though she had crossed an invisible line. Beside Warren, Evelyn Ashford tightened her grip on her husband's arm. Elegant and admired throughout New York society, she looked uncomfortable the moment she saw Simone approach. "I am not here to cause trouble," Simone said quietly. Her voice remained calm despite the growing tension. Warren shook his head. "Whatever this is, tonight is not the time." Around them, guests exchanged curious looks. Some whispered among themselves. Others simply watched. A few reporters standing near the stage subtly angled their cameras toward the confrontation. Simone lowered her hand. For a second, it looked as though she might walk away. Yet something in her expression suggested she had not come all this way merely to leave. She looked toward Evelyn, who immediately turned her face away. That small reaction did not go unnoticed. Then Simone stepped back without another word. The crowd slowly relaxed. Conversations resumed. Glasses clinked once again. Yet the atmosphere felt different now. A question had entered the room. Who was she? And why had Evelyn looked so unsettled? What nobody in the ballroom knew was that before the night ended, Warren Ashford would stand frozen after hearing 3 words whispered into his ear. 3 simple words. 3 words that had never appeared in newspapers, never appeared in interviews, never appeared in legal documents or public records. 3 words connected to a memory buried more than 20 years in the past. And those 3 words would change everything. If you enjoy stories about truth, redemption, and unexpected family secrets, subscribe to the channel and tell us where you are watching from today. The Ashford Foundation Gala was the most anticipated charity event of the season. Every year it raised millions of dollars for children's programs across the country. Tonight's event was larger than ever. A massive stage dominated one end of the ballroom. Giant screens displayed photographs from foundation projects. Waiters carried silver trays through the crowd while guests discussed donations and investment opportunities. At the center of it all stood Warren and Evelyn Ashford, widely viewed as one of the most admired couples in philanthropic circles. They smiled for photographs, accepted congratulations, thanked donors. From the outside, they appeared to have everything: wealth, influence, respect, stability. Yet hidden beneath the elegance of the evening was a secret that had survived for more than 2 decades. A secret known by almost no one. Simone Hartwell had carried that secret with her into the ballroom. In her purse rested a small object she had protected for years. She had not come seeking money. She had not come seeking attention. She had come seeking answers. As she stood alone near the edge of the ballroom beneath the warm glow of crystal light, she watched the Ashfords greet guests and accept praise. Across the room, Evelyn glanced in her direction again. This time the look lasted only a second before disappearing. But it was enough. Simone had seen it. Recognition, fear, and perhaps something else. Something much deeper. The night was only beginning, and the truth that had slept for 20 years was slowly waking up. Simone Hartwell remained near the edge of the ballroom long after the attention had shifted away from her. Around her, the gala continued exactly as it had before the confrontation. Wealthy donors discussed charitable initiatives over glasses of sparkling water and champagne. Reporters moved between tables gathering quotes for tomorrow's articles. The orchestra filled the room with elegant melodies that echoed beneath the towering crystal chandeliers. To everyone else, the uncomfortable moment seemed finished. But for Simone, It had only confirmed something she already suspected. Evelyn Ashford recognized her. The realization settled heavily in her chest. For years she had imagined what this night might look like. She had rehearsed conversations in her mind during long drives, sleepless nights, and quiet mornings before work. Yet now that she stood only a few feet away from the people connected to the mystery that had shaped her entire life, certainty felt more complicated than she expected. Simone was 36 years old and had spent most of her career helping children navigate difficult circumstances. As a program coordinator for a nonprofit organization serving foster youth, she dedicated her life to giving others the stability she never fully had herself. Growing up inside the foster care system taught her resilience. It also taught her patience. Homes changed. Schools changed. Adults entered and exited her life with little warning. Through it all, one question remained unanswered. Where did she come from? The records available to her had always been incomplete. Names were missing. Dates conflicted. Entire sections of her early history seemed to disappear whenever she tried to investigate. Most people eventually accepted such gaps. Simone never could. Years earlier, while sorting through documents connected to a closed children's program, she discovered something unexpected. A photograph. At first glance it seemed ordinary. A smiling businessman standing beside a young child during a charity event. But the moment she looked closer, something felt strangely familiar. She could never explain exactly why. The photograph eventually led to more questions. Those questions led to archived files, forgotten reports, and conversations with retired employees who barely remembered events from decades earlier. Piece by piece, fragments of a larger story emerged. None of it provided complete answers. Yet each discovery pointed in the same direction, toward the Ashford family. Tonight she carried that original photograph in her purse. The edges had become worn from years of handling. She had almost taken it out after Warren confronted her earlier. Almost. But instinct stopped her. This was not the right moment. Not yet. Across the ballroom, applause erupted as a foundation representative announced another major donation. Guests smiled and raised their glasses. Warren and Evelyn stood together near the stage accepting congratulations. From a distance they appeared flawless, successful, respected, admired. Yet Simone could not stop thinking about Evelyn's reaction. It had not been confusion. It had not been annoyance. It had been recognition. The kind that arrives before words have a chance to form. Near one of the ballroom windows, Simone stepped away from the crowd and looked out at the Manhattan skyline. The city glowed beneath the night sky, millions of lights stretching toward the horizon. She reached into her purse and gently touched the photograph without removing it. The familiar edges steadied her thoughts. She was not here for revenge. She was not here to embarrass anyone. She only wanted the truth, whatever that truth turned out to be. Behind her, the gala continued growing louder as the evening progressed. But somewhere beneath the music, speeches, and celebration, Simone felt the invisible pull of a story that had begun long before she entered the ballroom. A story connected to a missing past, a frightened reaction, and a family that appeared determined to keep certain memories buried. And the deeper she looked, the more convinced she became that the answers she had spent her entire life searching for were finally within reach. Warren Ashford had built an empire without ever seeing most of it. Long before the gala, before the foundation, before the magazines called him one of the country's most influential philanthropists, he had earned a reputation as a relentless entrepreneur capable of turning struggling businesses into extraordinary successes. Investors trusted him. Communities respected him. Employees often described him as demanding but fair. Then, nearly 22 years earlier, a devastating accident changed everything. The details rarely appeared in public interviews because Warren disliked discussing personal hardships. What people did know was simple. He lost his eyesight and nearly disappeared from public life. For months, few outside his closest circle heard from him. Yet when he returned, he seemed transformed. Friends said he became more patient, more reflective, less concerned with public recognition. In the years that followed, he expanded his charitable work and dedicated enormous resources to helping children and families in need. Many people viewed his foundation as proof that adversity had made him more compassionate. Standing beside him through every stage of that transformation was Evelyn Ashford. Elegant, articulate, and deeply involved in the foundation's operations, she became one of the most recognizable figures in New York philanthropy. Together they appeared inseparable. Warren trusted her completely. In business meetings, social events, and private conversations, her opinion carried enormous weight. People who knew them often described their relationship as unshakable, which was precisely why Simone's presence unsettled Evelyn so visibly. Warren had noticed the tension earlier, although he interpreted it differently. As far as he understood, an unfamiliar woman had approached his wife during an important event and created discomfort. Protecting Evelyn felt natural, automatic. He never questioned it. Near the center of the ballroom, another donor finished speaking on stage to enthusiastic applause. Warren smiled politely and shook several hands as guests approached to congratulate him. Yet despite the activity surrounding him, a small part of his attention remained fixed on the encounter from earlier. Something about the woman's voice lingered in his memory. Calm, respectful, not aggressive, not demanding. There had been no hostility in her tone. The observation bothered him more than he expected. Beside him, Evelyn accepted praise from supporters while maintaining her usual composure. To everyone else she appeared perfectly relaxed. Warren, however, sensed subtle differences that others could not detect. Over the years, losing his eyesight had sharpened his awareness of small details. Breathing patterns, pauses between words, tiny changes in posture and movement. Earlier, when Simone approached, Evelyn's reaction had not felt like annoyance. Felt closer to fear. The thought surfaced unexpectedly before Warren pushed it aside. Surely there was another explanation. Across the ballroom, a foundation board member approached to discuss upcoming projects. Warren listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about funding and outreach programs. Yet even during the conversation, his thoughts occasionally drifted back to the mysterious woman standing near the windows. Why had she seemed so determined to speak with Evelyn? Why had she remained calm after being publicly dismissed? Most people would have argued. Most would have left. Simone had done neither. She simply waited. As the evening continued, guests moved between dining tables and display exhibits highlighting the foundation's achievements. Laughter filled the room once again. The atmosphere gradually recovered from the earlier tension. But beneath the polished surface of the gala, unseen threads were beginning to tighten. Warren could not yet see the pattern forming around him. He could not know that a photograph hidden inside Simone's purse contained a connection to his past. He could not know that Evelyn was watching Simone whenever she thought nobody noticed. And he certainly could not know that before the night ended, a memory he believed was lost forever would return with enough force to reshape everything he thought he knew about his family, his marriage, and the missing chapter of his life that had haunted him for more than 2 decades. Simone waited nearly 40 minutes before trying again. The ballroom had become busier as the evening progressed. Additional donors arrived. New speeches began. Photographers moved from table to table capturing moments for foundation publications. The constant activity created brief opportunities where people could slip unnoticed through the crowd. Simone hoped one of those opportunities might allow her a private conversation with Evelyn. She did not need 5 minutes. She did not even need 1 minute. 30 seconds would be enough. 30 seconds to show the photograph. 30 seconds to ask a question she had carried for most of her life. From across the room, she noticed Evelyn separating from a group of guests and moving toward a quieter hallway leading to the foundation exhibit gallery. The moment felt perfect. Simone carefully made her way through the crowd. Her heart beat faster with every step. Not from fear. From anticipation. For years she had followed fragments of information that led nowhere. Tonight, for the first time, she stood within reach of someone who might finally provide answers. The hallway beyond the ballroom was lined with photographs documenting the foundation's work over several decades. Children smiling during educational programs. Families receiving assistance. Volunteers working in communities around the country. The sounds of the gala faded slightly as Simone entered the corridor. Ahead of her, Evelyn paused near a display case containing historical photographs from the foundation's earliest years. "Mrs. Ashford," Simone said gently. Evelyn turned immediately. For a brief moment, surprise flashed across her face. Then it disappeared behind a practiced smile. "Excuse me," Evelyn replied. I really do not think we have anything to discuss. Simone stopped several feet away, careful not to appear confrontational. Please. I am not here to embarrass you. Evelyn's posture stiffened. Then why are you here? Simone reached into her purse but kept her hand inside. She did not remove the photograph. Not yet. Because I think you already know who I am. The hallway seemed quieter after those words. Evelyn stared at her without speaking. For several seconds neither woman moved. Then Evelyn looked away first. You are mistaken, she said. The answer came too quickly. Too carefully. Simone noticed the slight tremor in her voice. Am I? Evelyn glanced toward the ballroom entrance as though hoping someone might appear. I think it would be best if you left this event. Simone felt disappointment settle over her. Not because of the response itself. Because it confirmed her suspicions. Someone with nothing to hide would have asked questions. Evelyn only wanted distance. Before Simone could answer, another voice entered the conversation. Is there a problem? Warren had arrived. Guided by a foundation staff member, he approached the hallway with calm confidence. The employee quietly excused himself and stepped away. Evelyn immediately moved toward her husband. Everything is fine, she said. Yet her voice carried tension Warren instantly recognized. This woman has been following me throughout the evening. Simone opened her mouth to respond, but Warren spoke first. I believe we already discussed this earlier. His tone remained polite but firm. My wife has made it clear she wishes to be left alone. The words stung more than Simone expected. Not because they were cruel. Because they came from a man who had no idea why she was there. She looked at Warren for a moment, studying the face she had seen countless times in photographs. So many years. So many unanswered questions. Yet the truth remained trapped just beyond reach. I only wanted a conversation, Simone said quietly. Sometimes conversations arrive too late, Evelyn replied. The statement hung in the air between them. Strange. Unexpected. Almost revealing more than she intended. Warren frowned slightly. Something about the exchange felt wrong. He could sense it. Yet before he could explore the feeling, Evelyn gently guided him back toward the ballroom. Simone remained alone in the hallway as they disappeared into the crowd. In the silence that followed, she finally removed the old photograph from her purse. Under the soft gallery lights, she looked at the image once more. The smiling businessman, the little girl beside him, and a story that someone seemed determined to keep buried. But the deeper the resistance became, the more certain Simone felt that she was closer than ever to the truth. When Simone returned to the ballroom, she understood something she had been trying to avoid all evening. The answers she wanted were not going to be handed to her willingly. Every attempt to speak privately with Evelyn had produced the same result. Deflection. Distance. Fear. Yet the encounter in the gallery hallway had also given Simone something valuable. Confirmation. People did not react that way to strangers. They reacted that way to memories they hoped would remain buried. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal light as another round of speeches began. Guests applauded generously. Large screens displayed photographs of children helped through foundation programs. To anyone watching from the outside, the event remained a tremendous success. But beneath the polished surface, tension continued building. Simone quietly took a seat at an empty table near the back of the room. From there she could observe both the stage and the Ashford family without attracting attention. She placed the old photograph beside her purse and stared at it for a moment. The image had faded over time, but the faces remained clear. The businessman. The little girl. The same little girl who wore a small bracelet decorated with a tiny firefly charm. Simone's fingers moved instinctively toward her own wrist where she now wore that same charm attached to a modern bracelet. It was the only item that had stayed with her through every foster home, every relocation, and every unanswered year. A sudden burst of applause pulled her attention back to the stage. Warren had stepped forward to thank donors for their generosity. His voice filled the ballroom with warmth and sincerity. People listened because they respected him. Simone found herself listening too. The strange thing was that she liked him. Everything she had learned about Warren suggested he genuinely cared about helping people. That realization made the situation more painful. He was not her enemy. He was simply standing on the wrong side of a truth he did not know existed. Across the room, Evelyn appeared increasingly uneasy. She smiled when cameras pointed in her direction. She greeted guests. She accepted compliments. Yet every few minutes her eyes drifted through the crowd searching for Simone. Eventually their gazes met again. This time neither looked away immediately. The distance between them seemed to disappear for a brief moment. Then Evelyn turned sharply and whispered something to an assistant standing nearby. Minutes later, a foundation security coordinator approached Simone's table. The man appeared uncomfortable before he even spoke. "Good evening, ma'am," he said politely. "I have been asked to check whether you have the appropriate credentials for the private donor areas." Simone understood immediately. The request was not about credentials. It was about pressure. Several nearby guests glanced toward her. Conversations softened. Curiosity spread. She calmly showed her invitation. The coordinator reviewed it and nodded. "Everything appears to be in order." His relief was obvious. "Thank you." Yet the damage was already done. The attention lingered. Whispers moved from table to table. Some guests began viewing Simone as a problem rather than a guest. Others simply looked confused. Warren noticed the commotion from the stage. After concluding his remarks, he stepped down and quietly asked a staff member what had happened. The explanation reached him within seconds. His expression hardened. A few minutes later, he approached Simone directly. The surrounding crowd immediately sensed something important was about to happen. "Miss Hartwell," Warren said, his voice calm but firm. "I believe it would be best if we ended this tonight." Several guests stopped speaking altogether. Simone slowly stood. "Ended what?" she asked. Warren drew a slow breath. "Whatever it is you are trying to accomplish." The words echoed through the silence around them. Evelyn stood nearby listening. Simone looked from Warren to Evelyn and back again. Her heart ached, not from embarrassment but from frustration. She was so close to the truth she could almost touch it. Yet every door continued closing before she could step through. Still, she refused to become angry. She refused to create a scene. Instead, she reached into her purse and wrapped her fingers around the old photograph. The moment she had waited for was coming. Not yet, but soon. And deep down, she sensed that neither Warren nor Evelyn was truly prepared for what would happen when the past finally stopped hiding. Simone did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked at Warren for a long moment, studying the face of a man who believed he was protecting his family. Around them, the ballroom remained unusually quiet. Guests pretended to return to their conversations, but many continued listening from a distance. The tension was impossible to ignore. Yet rather than arguing, Simone simply nodded. "You are right about one thing," she said softly. "This cannot continue tonight." Warren seemed relieved by the response. "Then perhaps we understand each other." Simone almost smiled. The truth was that they understood almost nothing. Not yet. She gathered her purse from the table and walked away without another word. The crowd gradually relaxed as she disappeared through a side exit leading toward the foundation gardens. Behind her, conversations slowly returned. The gala resumed its polished rhythm. Music filled the ballroom again. Donors raised glasses. Photographers continued taking pictures. To most guests, the evening's strange interruption appeared finished. Outside, however, the world felt entirely different. The foundation garden stretched across several acres behind the historic building. Stone pathways wound through carefully maintained flower beds and quiet courtyards, illuminated by soft lantern light. The sounds of the gala faded into the distance. Above her, the New York skyline shimmered beneath a clear night sky. Simone followed a narrow path toward a secluded bench beside a reflecting pool. For the first time all evening, she was completely alone. She sat down slowly and removed the photograph from her purse. The edges felt familiar beneath her fingertips. Beside it, she placed a small wooden box she had carried with her for years. The box was old, scratched, unremarkable to anyone else. Yet inside rested the few possessions that had survived from the earliest chapter of her life. She opened it carefully. Inside lay a faded photograph, a hospital bracelet, and a small silver charm shaped like a firefly. The charm caught the lantern light and reflected a faint glow across her hand. Simone stared at it quietly. She remembered being a little girl and tracing its shape with her fingers during long nights when she could not sleep. She remembered asking foster parents where it came from. None of them knew. She remembered carrying it through every move, every school, every uncertain beginning. Somehow it had become more than an object. It was proof that her story started somewhere, even if she could not see where. A cool breeze moved across the garden. Somewhere nearby, water flowed gently through a stone fountain. Simone closed her eyes for a moment. Memories surfaced. Not complete memories. Fragments. A man's voice. Laughter near a river. Tiny lights floating in darkness. A feeling of safety. Then nothing. Just empty space where answers should have been. Footsteps echoed briefly from a distant path. Simone opened her eyes and looked toward the foundation building. Through large windows she could still see guests moving inside the ballroom. Their lives continued untouched by the questions that had defined hers. Yet something felt different now. For years she had chased possibilities. Tonight, for the first time, possibility had become evidence. Evelyn's reactions. The photograph. The fear in her eyes. None of it was coincidence. Simone reached into the wooden box and unfolded a fragile piece of paper tucked beneath the bracelet. The paper contained a single handwritten note discovered years earlier among archived records connected to the children's program where she had once lived. Most of the writing had faded. Only a few words remained readable. She studied them again beneath the garden light. Then she looked at the firefly charm resting in her palm. Her breathing slowed. A realization was beginning to take shape. Not a complete answer. Not yet. But something close. Somewhere inside the ballroom, Warren Ashford continued greeting donors, unaware that the missing piece of his past was sitting alone in a quiet garden, only a few hundred feet away. And somewhere even deeper beneath the weight of 22 years, a memory neither of them had fully forgotten was slowly finding its way back to the surface. Simone sat motionless beside the reflecting pool long after the sounds of the gala faded into the background. The small silver firefly charm rested in her palm beneath the garden lantern light. Across the water, reflections from the foundation building shimmered gently on the surface. Everything felt quiet, suspended, as though the night itself were holding its breath. Then she heard footsteps approaching along the stone pathway. At first she assumed it was another guest seeking a moment away from the crowd. But the footsteps moved carefully, guided rather than wandering. Simone looked up. Warren Ashford was walking through the garden alone. One hand rested lightly on a cane while a foundation employee followed several yards behind. When they reached the edge of the courtyard, Warren thanked the employee and asked to continue by himself. The man hesitated before respectfully stepping away. Warren remained standing near the path. "I thought I might find you here," he said. Simone was surprised. "Why?" Warren turned his face slightly toward the sound of her voice. "Because despite everything that happened tonight, you never sounded like someone looking for attention." The answer caught her off guard. For several seconds neither spoke. The water continued moving quietly through the fountain nearby. Finally Warren stepped closer. "I owe you at least one conversation." Simone looked down at the charm in her hand. The moment she had imagined for years was standing in front of her. Yet suddenly she found herself uncertain. Warren lowered himself onto the opposite end of the stone bench. "My wife believes you should leave this alone," he said. "But I have spent the last hour asking myself a question." Simone waited. Why would someone spend so much effort trying to reach us if they wanted nothing in return? The honesty in his voice made it impossible to dismiss. For the first time all evening, Warren was not defending anyone. He was listening. Simone reached into her purse and removed the faded photograph. She handed it to him instinctively before remembering he could not see it. The realization brought a brief sadness. Warren sensed the movement. "What is it?" he asked. "A photograph," Simone replied. "One I found years ago." Warren remained silent. "There is a man in the picture," Simone continued carefully. "He is standing beside a little girl at a charity event near a river." The moment she said the word river, Warren's expression changed almost imperceptibly. "Go on," he said quietly. Simone looked down at the photograph. Her pulse quickened. Everything seemed to narrow into this single moment. 22 years of questions. 22 years of missing pieces. 22 years leading here. I spent most of my life trying to understand why certain records disappeared, she said. Why certain names were missing. Warren listened without interruption. The deeper I searched, the more often your name appeared. The night air felt cooler now. Somewhere in the distance, music drifted faintly from the ballroom. Warren slowly folded his hands together. Miss Hartwell, he said. What exactly are you trying to tell me? Simone looked at him. The answer sat only a few words away. Yet speaking it felt impossible. She reached into the wooden box and wrapped her fingers around the firefly charm. The metal felt cool against her skin. Suddenly a memory surfaced with unusual clarity. Not a fragment this time. A complete moment. Darkness beside moving water. Tiny lights floating in the air. A man's laughter. A voice. Warm. Familiar. And 3 words spoken over and over again like a private game between a father and child. Simone's eyes widened. Warren heard the change in her breathing. What is it? He asked. Slowly, she stood from the bench and stepped closer. The world seemed to disappear around them. The fountain. The garden. The gala. Everything faded into silence. Then Simone leaned toward him and whispered 3 words that had never appeared in any report, interview, public record, or Foundation archive. Firefly by river. Warren froze. Completely. The color drained from his face. His hands tightened against the cane. For several endless seconds he did not move. He did not speak. He barely seemed to breathe. Because those 3 words belonged to a memory no stranger should have known. A memory shared only between a father and the little girl he had lost more than 2 decades ago. Warren remained frozen beside the reflecting pool. The night air moved gently through the garden, but he seemed unaware of it. The fountain continued its quiet rhythm. Distant music drifted from the ballroom. Yet none of those sounds reached him anymore. His entire world had narrowed to 3 words. 3 words that belonged to a memory he had protected for more than 20 years. Firefly by river. He repeated them almost inaudibly, as if speaking them aloud might somehow make them less real. Simone stood silently across from him, her heart pounding. She had imagined countless reactions over the years. Anger, denial, confusion. She had never imagined this. Warren slowly lowered himself back onto the stone bench. One hand covered his mouth while the other gripped the handle of his cane. For several moments he said nothing. Then a quiet laugh escaped him. Not a laugh of amusement. A laugh of disbelief. That is impossible, he whispered. Simone reached into her purse and removed the small wooden box. She carefully placed it on the bench beside him. I thought so too, she said. Warren turned his head toward the sound of her voice. Nobody knew those words. His voice trembled slightly. Nobody except my daughter. The last word seemed to linger in the air between them. Daughter. A word neither had spoken aloud until now. Simone opened the wooden box and removed the faded hospital bracelet, the old photograph, and finally the silver firefly charm. She gently placed the charm into Warren's hand. The moment his fingers touched the metal, his breathing changed. He traced the tiny wings with his thumb exactly as he had done decades earlier. The movement was immediate, instinctive, familiar. No, he whispered. No. Yet the denial lacked conviction. Memories were already rising to the surface. Summer evenings beside a river. Tiny lights floating above the water. A little girl laughing while chasing fireflies through the darkness. A small charm purchased from a gift shop during a charity event. A private phrase invented during a game only the 2 of them understood. Warren closed his hand around the charm. His shoulders trembled. Simone felt tears gathering in her own eyes, but she remained silent. This moment belonged to him. Eventually Warren spoke again. The accident happened during a Foundation trip. His voice sounded distant. There was confusion. Crowds. Emergency responders. Afterward. He stopped. The words became difficult. Afterward everyone told us she was gone. Simone sat beside him. The records I found tell a different story. Warren slowly nodded. I know that now. Footsteps suddenly approached from the garden entrance. Evelyn appeared at the edge of the pathway. The moment she saw the firefly charm in Warren's hand, the color left her face. For several seconds nobody moved. The silence became its own answer. Warren turned his head toward her. He could not see her expression, but he heard her breathing. Heard the fear she had hidden all evening. "Evelyn," he said quietly. "How long?" The question was simple, yet its weight filled the entire garden. Evelyn closed her eyes. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded exhausted. "I never meant for this to happen." Warren lowered his head. "That was not my question." Tears appeared in Evelyn's eyes. After the accident, there was confusion about her identity. The agencies involved made mistakes. By the time the truth became clear, everything had become complicated. Lawyers got involved. Advisors got involved. And then, she stopped. And then years passed. Warren sat perfectly still. Simone listened without interrupting. She had waited her entire life for answers, yet hearing them brought no satisfaction. Only sadness. So many years lost. So many moments that could never be recovered. Finally Warren stood. Slowly, carefully. He took a deep breath and looked toward the darkness beyond the garden, as though searching for something he could not see. When he spoke again, his voice was calm. "Tomorrow we will verify everything." Simone nodded. "Of course." Warren tightened his grip around the firefly charm. "But tonight," he said softly, "for the first time in 22 years, I believe I already know the truth." The next morning arrived quietly. Sunlight spilled across the gardens of the Ashford estate, painting the dew-covered grass in shades of gold. The gala was over. The reporters had gone home. The donors had returned to their lives. The music, speeches, and applause from the previous evening had faded into memory. What remained was something far more important: truth. In the weeks that followed, every question was examined carefully. Archived records were recovered. Agency reports were reviewed. Witnesses who had not spoken in years were contacted. What had once appeared impossible slowly became undeniable. The timelines matched. The records aligned. The physical evidence connected. And when the final verification arrived, it confirmed what Warren had already known the moment he heard those 3 words beside the reflecting pool. Simone Hartwell was the little girl he had spent 22 years mourning. The news never became a public spectacle. Warren refused to turn the discovery into a media event. There were no press conferences, no television interviews, no dramatic announcements. Some things, he believed, belonged to families rather than headlines. Instead, the weeks that followed were filled with conversations. Long conversations. Difficult conversations. Honest conversations. Warren wanted to know everything. He wanted to hear about the foster homes, the schools, the challenges, the victories, the people who had helped her along the way. Simone answered every question with patience. Some memories were painful. Others were beautiful. Together they began assembling the missing pieces of a life that should never have been separated in the first place. Evelyn also faced difficult truths. For years she had convinced herself that silence protected everyone involved. Now she understood the cost of that silence. The lost birthdays, the missed graduations, the ordinary moments that families often take for granted. No punishment could restore those years. No apology could return them. Yet to Simone's surprise, anger never became the center of the story. She had carried questions for most of her life, not hatred. And now that the answers finally existed, she discovered that peace mattered more than resentment. One morning several months later, Simone arrived at the Ashford estate just after sunrise. The property overlooked a quiet river beyond the trees. Warren was already outside waiting on a wooden bench near the water. The silver firefly charm rested in his hand. He often carried it now, not because he feared losing it again, because it reminded him of what had been found. Simone joined him on the bench. Neither spoke immediately. They simply listened to the sounds of the morning. Birds moved through the trees overhead. Gentle ripples crossed the river. A cool breeze carried the scent of fresh grass through the air. Finally Warren smiled. "You know," he said, "for years I believed losing my sight was the hardest thing that ever happened to me." Simone looked toward the water. "And now?" Warren turned the small charm between his fingers. "Now I realize the hardest thing was believing a chapter had ended when it had not." Silence returned. Comfortable silence. The kind shared between people who no longer need explanations. Across the river, the first full light of morning spread across the surface of the water. Tiny reflections shimmered like hundreds of floating stars. Simone noticed them first. Then Warren tilted his head slightly, listening to the river as though he could somehow sense the sunlight she was watching. Neither needed to say anything more. The years they had lost could never be recovered. But the years ahead still belonged to them. And sometimes that was enough. The breeze moved gently through the trees. The river continued its endless journey toward the horizon. Somewhere above the water, a single firefly charm caught the morning light and flashed briefly in Warren's hand. Then the moment passed. Quiet, simple, complete. And for the first time in more than 2 decades, neither of them was searching anymore.